There wasn't anything that I could not do um, without them. I mean, it's great that I have them, absolutely, but there wasn't anything that I am unable to do.
Welcome to the Evolving Past Alzheimer's podcast, where we are focused on bringing you information to help prevent from developing and improve from suffering with brain diseases like Alzheimer's and other dementias. I'm Dr. Nate Bergman, a physician and Chief Scientific Wellness Officer at Kemper Cognitive Wellness, and I'll be your guide on these sound waves. So whether you're a baby boomer who's worried that your brain wiring just isn't working like it once was, or you have a loved one with the disease, or you yourself have already been diagnosed and are wondering, what do I do now? You'll want to listen to this podcast. Each episode, we introduce you to the top doers and thinkers that are revisioning Alzheimer's, dementia, and just generally things in life's second half. If you have questions or comments, check us out on social media. To support us, go to patreon.com/evolvingpast and consider hitting the button and becoming a patron of this show if you find these episodes valuable. That's Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/evolvingpast. So here we go. Let's get better. Welcome back to the show. We have a different kind of show, but I think one that our listeners are going to really like a lot and appreciate, be able to relate to on many levels, like you probably haven't before. We have one of our patients and her family, two of her daughters joining us today. So in order to try to maintain some anonymity, we're going to use pseudonyms or fake names for our guests. So our guests today are Lisa. Welcome, Lisa.
Hello.
And her daughters, Natalie and Stacy.
Hi, glad to be here.
So first of all, where are you guys talking? So I'll start with you, Lisa, and Natalie. Where are you guys talking to us from today?
Well, actually, I'm at home. Natalie is actually here visiting with me because she can work from home. So she is here with me. And so we are all
Shaker Heights,
Shaker
Ohio.
Heights, Ohio.
Yeah.
Cleveland area.
Cleveland area.
Okay.
Yes.
And then Stacy, where are you?
Stacy, this is Stacy. I'm in the Atlanta area, Sandy Springs, Georgia.
Okay, excellent. So, we've only kind of jump right into it. I've known you guys for just over probably 6 months or so, but Lisa, you came to me and our clinic with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, and I just, if you can you and maybe with the help, if you want, of Natalie and Stacy, kind of tell me the story of what you remember about getting diagnosed. Just what was happening, and just kind of take us back a little bit.
Well, I'll just start by saying that I've always been a person that has been very, very good about getting my yearly doctor's appointments. I've always been good about that. And I think I've been especially good about it is because I came from a family that did not do that. And so I never missed going to a doctor's appointment. So I was quite surprised when I went to my doctor's appointment, and as part of the appointment was, I think it's the usual checking everything, reach a certain age, checking whatever they do, the usual, make sure
usual screening tests,
all my screenings and
labs.
everything. And so one of the tests that I took was, and Dr. Bergman, you know what that test was. But anyway, I went through a series of
like a MOCA test.
Yes, identifying and everything. I had no thoughts that anything was going to be different. I mean, I was very confident and was quite surprised when I found out that I was missing some of the what can I say, the links, some of the testing that I took. I was just quite surprised, and that started everything. And from there, and this was at the clinic, and from there they suggested that I have a
MRI.
MRI, right? And again, I'm very confident that there's nothing, because I've always been a very healthy person. So after having that MRI, Then they found, now y'all have to help me with this. What,
She was diagnosed, the diagnosis came back from the MRI that they believe that it was Alzheimer's.
So this
So
was at
we,
the Cleveland Clinic.
at the Cleveland
yes,
Clinic.
Okay.
So of course I'm shocked. I'm just shocked that was, that diagnosis. Of course, my family, they were also in shock and probably scared, and I was too. And so, okay, what do I do now? What does this mean? And I will say that when I went back to the doctor after having that test, um, basically the doctor wrote a prescription for me and handed it to me and sent me out the door. So now
said
what do
come
I
come
do?
back in 6 months.
Come back in 6 months.
So you
What
got
is
a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, in
Yeah,
shock, got a prescription for a
I got
medicine.
a prescription and goodbye and see you in 6 months. I had I I was first of all stunned, shocked, and didn't know what to do, and just thought, well, okay, I have this medicine, and I'm supposed to take that, and that's it. Of course, my family was stunned.
When it all started a few months earlier, the reason why she went and we had the test done is because me and Natalie had noticed in a few instances that my mother was seemed to be
Forgetting.
forgetting some things that she should have known, but it was very, very slight. Um, and so we said, let's just go and have this checked because, like she said, we stay on top of everything. So we just wanted to make sure that everything was okay.
And this was
And
maybe was this during COVID? This was 2020.
yes, this is
Year
during
after.
COVID, during 2020.
Okay.
And that's when it really started to stand out. But we thought, well, everyone has been isolated, there's no social activities. So
And
we wanted
some,
to make
and then
sure that she was okay. And when she went, the first diagnosis after the MOCA test was the mild cognitive impairment. And at that point, once she got that diagnosis, whenever a doctor tells me anything or my mother anything, I'm for good or bad, I'm a Googler.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
go to Google and I turn into Dr. Stacy and I am doing a deep dive on, okay, what exactly does this mean? Where could this possibly be going? And the first thing that stood out to me was that mild cognitive impairment was not an adequate descriptor or representation of the disease or the diagnosis
Yeah.
that
What's actually going on, right?
right. It's mild implies something that is rather light, but it was a very, very serious diagnosis. And I was reading from there that it could be the early onset of dementia and Alzheimer's. So I was definitely concerned and I started going down a rabbit hole of what all those things meant. And at that point, I was very upset because I knew that the diagnosis of Alzheimer's, from everything that I was seeing, the treatment path was not good. And for me, that was just unacceptable. I tend to be a fighter. And so I kept looking and researching and praying and saying, there has to be something else. There has to be more that you can do besides get this diagnosis and then just basically deteriorate with time. And thankfully, through a lot of prayer, I was led to Kemper Cognitive Wellness. I found it before we actually got the diagnosis for the Alzheimer's. This was still at the point where we just had mild cognitive impairment. And I looked it up. Researched Kemper. I started listening to the podcast, which helped me to feel better. And I told my sister Natalie, I said, I'm just going to stick this in the back pocket. We don't know where we're going, but to me, this seems like this would be an option of treatment, not the traditional path. And so we stuck it in the back pocket just in case we needed it. And thankfully, we had done the research ahead of time because when we got the diagnosis, we were devastated. And I immediately called Kemper and it gave us that, like 30 minutes after the diagnosis, I called Kemper, talked to a wonderful woman named Valerie, who immediately started to make me and my sister Natalie just feel so much better and feel like there was some level of hope.
And if I could just um, say this, when Stephanie, when Stacy brought it to me, um, I was fine with it. With going and seeking out because I really was probably say denial because they may have even seen some things about me that I didn't see about me because I don't know if you ever see your yourself. And so if I was missing anything or if I was not aware of some things, I would I wasn't aware of it. I wasn't aware of the things I wasn't aware of. So when I said to let them know what I had, what they had told me at the clinic, and as Stacy said, and she researched it and everything, that led things, So they brought it to my attention that you think that your awareness is at its best, but we think that we need to go further than that. And I was not against doing that because, of course, I've always been the kind of person that just going to the doctor is like I grew up in a family that did not go to the doctor. So I was
Right.
always a person that, okay, let's see what we can do about this. So when they brought it to my attention that I wasn't being my best self, which was a surprise. It was a surprise. You don't know that you don't know.
Yeah.
I was not anti-going. And so I'm very grateful and thankful that you know that was the path that we took, and that's where we went.
Yeah. And I met you um, and your family between Christmas and New Year's in
Yes.
2020. And, I want to say, I want to bring Natalie into this conversation a little bit. So, one of the great joys in the midst of all of the difficulty in working with families with cognitive impairment and it is meeting families that are just rallying around each other. And I've told you multiple times that your family, I think, is remarkable. And, not the only amazing family I've met, but certainly uncommon. Right? Certainly
Thank you.
uncommon. Um, so I also so Natalie, maybe we'll ask you this. So when I talked to everybody in our room, we thought, okay, maybe even though 2020 seems to accelerate things, and we saw that a lot because Lisa, you were so social and so involved in so many things, and when those were taken away because of COVID, because of the need for social distancing, um, when
And if
you
I could
lacked that sort of routine, it was really, really. That's when I think it became apparent to your family. What were you going to say?
I would say if I could jump in and say that you're exactly right as far as just being at home, not having the social interaction, and I'm a very involved person as far as friends and family and getting out, and so I think that made me aware. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know that you're not being your best self, even though you might feel. I don't know. I could say that I just felt sad. I felt sad.
Mm,
I wasn't getting out. I wasn't doing anything. Any of the social things that I had been involved with, like community service and things like that, those were online at home.
yeah,
So it was just it just went downhill. And so then getting that diagnosis just added to it. It was like, oh gosh, so I'm so thankful that I had a family that recognized, oh, you can feel that you're not being your best self, but when your family recognizes that you're not who you are, then they can take over and say, no, you're not, this is not you.
yeah. So absolutely. So that's such an interesting point. I do want to include your other daughter, Natalie, who's sitting there with you in Cleveland, into this to get her perspective because I'll say I stepped out into this field 2014 2015, if you want to call it a field, And I've seen a lot of people uh, selling and hyping things, and I'm somewhat hype sensitive. If you sit at a place working like the Cleveland Clinic, and I was there for several years, you don't really have to sell anything because the Cleveland Clinic sells itself. Where at this point, that it sells its reputation, it maintains a reputation, and but like you read things by Dale Bredesen or Richard Isaacson or other people, Mark Hyman maybe, and I mean, you hear about Kemper Cognitive Wellness, where we are now. And did you come to this, Natalie, with any sort of like skepticism or, like what was your mindset going in? It's like, why am I not hearing about this at the Cleveland Clinic? That kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Stacy and I are so different in terms of how we process. I am a processor. It just takes me a long time to think through things. And actually, I get migraines, I think, because of it, because I keep it all in my head. So when we received the first diagnosis of mild cognitive, that concerned me, but it was concerned to the point I almost felt paralyzed at the time. And this is why I'm so grateful that Stacy she's very action oriented in terms of the research, because, for me, hearing that even initial diagnosis, I think in my gut, I felt like there was more to it because I had noticed changes. And so Stacy kind of flew into the research portion of this, whereas I was more so like, this feels very permanent, and I had never heard of a solution. And so it wasn't that I don't believe Stacy can research and find things, but that was not information that I had ever been aware of, that there was any way to treat or stabilize. And I think that I also had a close friend whose mother had a similar diagnosis, and I just saw a very rapid decline. And so in my head, that was my fear. Like, this thing, once it starts, there is nothing you can do to manage it. But I would say that by the time we got to the Kemper, it wasn't even the initial appointment. It was talking to Valerie over the phone, which was the same day that we got the Alzheimer's diagnosis. That was the first time that I actually felt like an
Hope.
ounce of hope. And I think by the end of that conversation, it grew tenfold. And that was from the bit that Valerie shared in terms of other families' experience with Kemper. And then I went from that to the podcast and to just doing the same, like listening to the things that Stacy recommended about the research that you had done, Dr. Bergman, and Dr. Dale Bredesen as well.
Yeah, and I want to just push back on this one more time. So thank you for that answer, Natalie. And I want to invite this for Lisa, obviously, and Stacy. Um, because this isn't sort of like, we have a number of people that see us that will go to a neurologist, people that really are experts at what they do. And I don't want to take away from expertise that people, there's a lot of very, very smart people trying to solve this problem of Alzheimer's for a very long time. And doing good work, and their heart's in the right place, and they don't have, all the conflicts of interest sometimes that we like to, point out with healthcare and healthcare workers. But and they may just not believe. In fact, I had my first patient with all this stuff back 5-6 years ago. Was a patient of my next door neighbor, who's a neurologist and works at the Cleveland Clinic. And he started on his stuff, and he was in his early mid 60s at the time. And like, he started the work that you guys are similar to the work that you're doing now, Lisa, and family. And he felt like the neurologist said, "Oh wow, it's like you turned back time like 3 years. It's like you reverse this, so to speak, 3 years in." And so, but he didn't. The neurologist himself didn't sort of want to know what he was doing to make it work. Like I was just kind of surprised, and that was my first first experience with that as a doctor, and then secondly, and sort of to bring it back to you guys, when you don't see your regular doctor, the geriatrician that diagnosed you, the neurologist that diagnoses someone, when you don't see them supportive, where do you find the clarity, the conviction to sort of move outside what we, I guess, what some people have come to know and trust to some degree? Trust, I would say, is sort of depends on the person, the individual, and where they come from, where their families come from. But like a system that you trust, and say, why is this person over here in a clinic, and on the side, the only one doing this? Like, and why is it that people don't come to the conclusion that what we're doing here is quackery or something like that? Do you know what I mean?
Well,
Right.
if I could say this, if I could say this, it really helped. I'm just speaking for myself. I don't know about others, but the fact that I have a family that was able to see what I did not see, and to make a point of saying she's not being herself. She's not who we normally see, because you don't know yourself. I thought I mean, I knew I was, it was just sad that I was at home and that there wasn't my usual outside self and all of that. But I don't think it was just the getting that diagnosis from the clinic that told them. I think that brought it to them to say, no, we do know, we have noticed, we can tell that you're not, who you.
And Lisa, if I recall our conversation and looking at my notes and kind of preparation for this interview, I mean, it seemed like there were, and this is important, I think, for the audience in general to understand that it wasn't just 2020 that there was some sort of signs. It was at least a year and a half or so
Yes.
before that. But like COVID, and you are you are requiring to be removed, like we all were, from all of the things that we did on a day-to-day basis with as many, and you had a higher number than I would say the average person has in terms of obligations and commitments and boards and committees, et cetera, that you were on, or continue to be on. It was higher, so so it became more obvious then. But it wasn't like all of a sudden in 2020 um, there was an acceleration. It became more obvious, is from what I understand.
Yes, because just being out of my usual
Routine.
routine and involvement, and and maybe it was. Sometimes I think maybe that was a good thing, because maybe that brought it to you know
The
to
forefront.
the forefront, that might have gone on and would gone unnoticed. Eventually it would have been, noticeable, but maybe um, the isolation, the
Slowed you down
slowed me
almost.
down. I
Yeah.
wasn't doing my usual. I wasn't being my usual self, and that brought it to them as well, family, that they could probably see some things that I wasn't aware of myself.
100%.
So to circle back around, Dr. Bergman, to answer your question, I think that in terms of where my level of belief and trust for Kemper came into play, um, was really just from doing my own research. And as I was saying before, I do that with everything. So I'm not a doctor, but the great thing about the internet is that I can Google and I can read studies. I may not understand everything, but if there are words or things that I don't understand, I can then Google those. And I can get a good enough grasp to understand different opinions and exactly what is going on. So I just continued to dig and to dig and to dig. And the principles that Kemper followed, or the different things that Kemper looks at, the blood markers, changing your diet, all of those things, I also was seeing consistency in other articles that were out there. So my thought was, we know we're doing nothing. We know what that gets
Right.
us.
Right.
What do we have to lose to actually try to do something? And then, like I said, the other part of it was just the testimonials from patients that went to Kemper and talking to people within the office. And one other good thing about the people within your office is everybody knows when they're being sold something. With Kemper and everyone that we've interacted with at Kemper, you can tell that there's a true passion and there's a true the people in your office truly care
Believe.
about the patients and helping to better people's lives. So that was very comforting as well.
That's kind of you to say, and I just want the listeners to know we didn't. We're not paying these
No,
people to
I'm not.
say these
It
things.
was
That
not a
wasn't
paid. It
prepared,
wasn't a
right?
paid.
I'm,
But I
I'm, I'm
appreciate the
not
compliment. No,
being
it's
paid.
we definitely strive and talk about that by design. So I'm glad that's good comes through for you. Let's talk about like implementation, right? So you're researching this stuff, and then everybody's like everybody comes in with, and I say everybody, I mean patients with families. So people with significant cognitive impairment, dementia, again, mild cognitive impairment versus dementia or Alzheimer's dementia, which is what, Lisa, you have been diagnosed with. So by definition, it's a problem with thinking, memory, cognition, some aspect of being able to think through things. Let's say plus there's a beginning, and there's various stages of this, obviously, an inability to really feel comfortable or be completely safe on one's own 100%, right? Doesn't mean that people can't live on their own with early stages of dementia. We've had other people on our show, as you know, that have done that. Christy Thelker from several weeks ago. But people come into the office with different ideas. Like maybe they read a book or they saw a webinar with Dale Bredesen or something we talked about, and there's maybe a sense of, okay, well, how hard could this be, right? I got to pay some money and I got to get some lab tests and I'll take some pills, I'll take some vitamins. And I have seen that. I mean, I've definitely seen that where people come in and they just think it's going to be easy, right? So we do have to talk about implementation, right? So we come, we talk the first time, collect lots of information. We visit a second time and we sort of begin to install a plan. And that's when everybody's eyeballs get really big. And they're like, but you guys were pretty undeterred. I mean, you guys just kind of took it and, all right, let's figure out how to do this, break it off into an action plan. And do you guys want to kind of so explain? I don't know who wants to take the lead on this question first, but at that second visit where we gave you a lot of the recommendations, like we start a couple things the first time, but like we do the beginning of the big plan. Just how did that hit you? How did that feel? Like, oh my God, how am I going to do all this stuff? Like, how did you feel about that? Because I think a lot of people can relate to this as well.
So, being 100% honest, I remember the day that we reviewed the assessment. I think there were 17 categories, in
17,
terms
17 pages.
17 pages. Might have been 17 categories as well in terms of things to do. And I had mixed feelings because part of me felt like relief that there were things that you can do because again I had not heard anything except that prescription that my mom was given. But then the other part of me felt internally, and I didn't want to probably express this to have my feeling kind of go over to my mom, but you know a bit overwhelmed because it's like, okay, this is a lot. And Dr. Bergman, you were pretty clear, which I appreciate. You were very clear that this is not a plan that you can just pick and choose a few things to implement and think that, you're going to have the best results. You just said this is a comprehensive plan and all things work together. And so those 17 pages, for me, it's like, okay, this is going to be a lot, but there's no reason, there was nothing on that list that we could not do. I knew my mom was willing and able to do her part, which is the exercise and the diet and to take the supplements. And I think a lot of the other things, it was a matter of
following
conquering and
right,
dividing,
right.
And organizing.
and organizing. And I'm not taking away from that part of it because it's a significant part of the work. But Stacy and I we kind of had a conversation where we said there isn't anything on this list that is something out of our range of ability to do.
Not anything that I couldn't do, even if they. This is Lisa talking now. There wasn't anything that I could not do without them. I mean, it's great that I have them, absolutely, but there wasn't anything that I am unable to do.
I think I'm gonna vary what she said just a little bit.
This is
I
Stacy
think
talking from Atlanta. Okay.
yes, this is Stacy. I Although there wasn't anything outside that my mother could not do, I will say that one of the key and most important things, because there is so much, is that you have a support system
Yes.
around
Totally,
you
totally.
to help to
Yes.
implement it. Because it's like with anything, any major project that you undertake. Of course, could you do it on your own? Absolutely. But are you going to be able to do it with the ease and have the level of success that you would have if you had others around you
And
that are
Agree.
supporting you?
and
And
if I could
that
pop
was
in,
key.
right, and if I could jump in and say that I hope I didn't give that impression, because they, the support system, I totally has been important to my success. And and I'm going to say success because I think that I have been successful
Yes.
with this.
Yeah.
And I do believe that having a support system is just
We
really important. For me, it has been.
yeah. We wanted my mom to focus on actually what we would call doing the exercises, as Natalie said, uh, taking the supplements, doing the games. But behind the scenes, what Natalie and myself had to organize was okay, we have 20 different supplements per day to take. We need to make sure that she's getting all the supplements, that the supplements are organized, um, that we have the supplements on hand. So what's coming up, that we have the appropriate food on hand. So a lot of it was really coming up with the routine and all the mechanics behind the scene to make it easy to just hand over to my mom to then go and do, which is also its own feat. So there are two big parts of it.
And that was huge for me, to have that backup. I can't even call it backup because they were in the forefront. Um, was huge because they make sure that everything works and operates, and they'll call me on it, or you didn't do this, or did you do that. um,
And I would say, just to add one thing,
So this is Natalie sitting
yes, this is
Bergman. Okay.
Natalie. Dr. Bergman, you gave us, I don't even know if you knew it was a big piece of advice because you mentioned it. I just didn't forget it. You said to be very aware and observant of, if we set up a system that kind of didn't work in a certain area, it was kind of on us to adjust, if that makes sense. And so part of what Stacy and I did, like if we laid out what we thought was an organization, a plan for taking the medicine, but that didn't seem to really work for my mom, then we would go back and say, well, hold on, maybe we need to set this up a little bit differently. Should we put the medicine in the bathroom because then it's visible, the supplements, and then that's more of a trigger. And so it was almost like for me being more tuned in than ever to try to understand how can we set this up so it can
it
run as
works.
efficiently and as smoothly as possible, and kind of playing off of, my mom. Like if I know that she likes to take a walk at 11 a.m., okay, can we put the water bottle by the door to make sure that she's getting her water in when she leaves? So just
Yeah.
making those adjustments, I thought
Yeah.
it was such a helpful suggestion that you made.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the biggest thing that helped us was we have a checklist for the entire week. And that checklist includes all of the key things that my mom needs to do every day. And it's a great way to help her stay on track
Oh,
and
also,
also to keep, for us to make sure that she's staying on track. Because, time back to what Dr. Bergman said, you can't do this piecemeal.
yeah.
Everything has to come together. And so we had to be extra vigilant to make sure that we were dotting all our I's and crossing all our T's.
And if I can say this, the checklist, having the checklist, um, maybe this is the teacher in me, but it helps me to know exactly at all times what I need to do, when I need to do it. And for me, it's a help.
So that's great to know because, one of the things that I get sort of my spidey sense goes up with is when I hear someone, it could be myself included, or someone who's a care partner, so a spouse, live in, a child, will say, Dad needs to do this. You have to do that. And so we have to, we also employ a family dementia coach, actually, where, because there's a lot of times, as you guys may or may not have seen, there can be there can be some friction. Like, I don't want to do this. I'm not interested in doing this. And if
Hmm.
if if Lisa, if you as the person with the cognitive impairment don't want to do it, it becomes a very big struggle. In fact, so this is definitely sort of an opt-in program. So I'm glad to hear you say the checklist is helpful, as opposed to, oh my God, my militant daughters are
Well, I have
forcing me through all this. You know what I'm
well
saying?
because I have two enforcers,
Yeah.
so sometimes we fight,
Yeah.
but
So,
they don't let me off the hook, and so
and I actually want to swing back to that in a few minutes, because that's, I think, it's a really important thing, because people say, well, why isn't this available everywhere? And there are, because there, first of all, there's a number of steps on the research side to go through to see if this is really what we think it is, and who does it actually work for, and how scalable is it, etc. And at the end of the day, it's like an opt-in. It's like you choose to do this. It's sort of like a transplant. Like in a transplant, somebody wants a liver transplant, a heart transplant, a kidney transplant. They don't just give them out to everybody, right? You have to have a situation and a scenario, that we're psychologically stable, and a support system. There's a sort of a number of things that are, you would call them, beyond traditional medical considerations, in order to have a sort of a successful transplant. I think, that's often an analogy I draw. But I want to ask you for a minute about results, right? So you're about, sort of about 5-6 months into this. Um, what have you guys seen in the last 6 months, in terms of better, worse, the same? Like, where have you seen improvements? Because I know you've seen improvements.
Yeah, I can comment. This is Natalie. So I would say that I can kind of give you a reference point, like as a baseline where we were starting
Mhm.
back in November, which at that point we had the mild cognitive decline. Like, we had that diagnosis, but we had not been to Kemper. And Stacy and I were home for Thanksgiving, and there were several things that I noticed that just made me concerned, because it was so unlike my mom. But a lot of word confusion. So, can you pass the turkey? But she's actually referring to the corn. I'm going to put the pie in the oven, but she's actually referring to the turkey. So that really jumped out at me. I remember that holiday. And in addition to that, there was confusion with colors, where I knew the color that she, the grass is green, but she may be saying blue, but I knew that she understood what color it was. Same thing with
Mm.
places that we go, very common places in the area. We go to Target more than we should, probably every every other day. It's a place that we always go, but she may
Yeah.
call that CVS, and I'm like, and but driving to Target. So those were the things that we noticed, or at least I noticed in November. And I would say that over the past 6 months or so, it's so interesting. Like, when I even remember back to how I felt and what I noticed, it's so different than where we are now because um, a lot of those things just don't happen nearly as often. Some of them don't really happen at all. So when we get in the car to go somewhere, you know, let's go to Target, we're going to Target, I mean, meaning like the word is matching, her intention. The same thing with the colors. There were certain areas that we knew, were kind of problem areas, colors, numbers, common places, items. And it's not that it doesn't happen ever, I want to be realistic, but it is just far less than where we were back in November, to the point where I used to feel very concerned, like I was kind of on the edge to jump in to correct or help, like, oh, you meant Target. Oh, you meant that. I don't feel like that at all because it's just not something I even consciously think about at the forefront of my mind because there has been so much improvement.
Right. This is Stacy. So, one of the things that I noticed, I always worked on the educational piece. So, I did a lot of the brain games with my mom. And one of the apps that we use, it improves the more questions that you get correct, the harder that it gets. And just playing the game with my mom, it has gotten so much harder. But I also, like, I'm so proud of her because I see the tremendous growth. It's been really amazing to see her get back some of the skills that she maybe um, had become shaky on, to get those back, and to see her push herself even further. I really see the progress in all those areas that Nicole mentioned, and even other areas as well. And one other thing is that her when she speaks, her when she's talking, she's a lot more fluid, a lot less choppy. She's just back to the mom that I always knew. It was like last year somewhere we just crashed and we weren't as aware of it because we're here in Atlanta. And so the crash was in November, and then we just rebounded, and now I feel back like, okay, this is the mom that I know. This is the person that I know.
I would even just add, you know, in terms of there's times where I actually feel like this is my mom from even some years ago in terms of she will ask me about people or things that sometimes I'm like, I don't even remember. Like, like she's like, how's your friend who used to play soccer on the west side of town? And I'm like, oh my gosh, you remember that? Like, there's just, it makes me kind of smile. Or she may remember, a work story that I've shared with her. Whereas before I was kind of, I don't know if I knew there was a problem where I may say, remember my boss Adam, that's my boss. Where it was like that was a conversation we may have every day, and now she's more so like, yeah, Adam has the two kids, right? And I mean, meaning
Mhm.
we're just so in such a different place. So a lot of the conversation that we're having reminds me of maybe like almost throwback conversation that we were having years ago, because her memory. It seems much sharper than it was, back when we first started this in November.
And if I
Yeah.
could say this, you just don't know that you don't know, as the person that's involved, you don't know these things that they're sharing. Uh, I had no awareness that they were noticing some things because, like if I'm not saying let's go to Target and I'm talking about something else, or I just had no awareness that
Right.
I was not doing, these
Kita,
things.
you've made that point a couple times, which I want to amplify that point of you don't know what you don't know. So
Yeah,
it's very strange. If somebody has stomach pain, they can usually
yeah,
describe, oh, I have stomach pain and it's down by my belly button or it's on the right side below my belly button, that kind of thing. Or you have like, but with cognitive issues, it's very hard to explain. Like
yes.
we don't our although I do think this is sort of in the process of changing. It's hard to describe. Usually people say, oh, I have a problem with memory, right? But they don't often say or explain what Natalie was explaining before. Well, instead of saying, that store down the street, you said, we're going to Target. Or instead of calling something red that wasn't red, you're naming the colors more correctly. We even talked about that you seem to be more aware of time zones, right? Where if Stacy was on a meeting in San Francisco, you were doing the calculations in your head and say, oh, you must be 3 hours earlier, which was, so those are profound changes. Like those are not simple changes, even though they seem like simple things. But in terms of the work and the effort that you've put in to sort of get to that place, it's as you know better than any of us. It's no small feat. You know what you've put in, the work that you've put in. So I think it is a really important point about you just don't know what you don't know. It's when things start to break down, especially if you're the one with sort of having the experience of cognitive decline. Sometimes it can be really hard to either articulate or put your finger on exactly what the problem is. So people say brain fog, memory, I can't remember names, talk about confusion. But a lot of times it's just like, wow, the pace of mom's speech is different, or her word choices seem simpler than they were before. And those things point to a lot of internal changes you guys now are aware. So, even in your ability to just like when we just did the paper and pencil tests in my office, the MOCA test, which for us hadn't changed all that much, the numbers, but some of the things that were improving were really interesting. Your ability to sort of figure things out, sort of take patterns and say, okay, I know what's going on here, and I can complete that. And those are like big changes, right? Those are big changes. So that to me is very exciting. So thank you for mentioning that again. I do want to ask you guys, and Lisa just jumped up for a second, so we'll ask the you guys first. What has been, we want to talk about just for a minute difficulty and sort of maintaining motivation, right? Because there isn't yet a lot of examples out there, although it's starting to be people that are some of the people living with cancer or living with HIV or living with heart disease or whatever. There aren't a lot of people just sort of like living with Alzheimer's disease. If I can share, like there's the MRI findings were profound, profound volume loss, like certain areas of the brain that are sort of classic findings for Alzheimer's, very, very, a lot of atrophy. And it's just not supposed to get better. There's not supposed to be an improvement. And so I guess to me, it's very exciting. The most exciting thing was when your mom said to us when we sat down last time we visited about almost a month ago. She said, I feel like myself again. And she had a big smile. Like that was very exciting to me. I think I probably got a little emotional there for a second. But but it's not easy. What has been the kind of the hardest thing for you guys? And when Lisa returns, we'll ask her what's been sort of the hardest thing for her, and then how do you maintain motivation, that mindset?
This is Stacy. I think that I think one thing that we would share with everyone is just to be realistic. We have had major points of frustration and arguing, and you know, I think the biggest thing is that you have those moments and then you reset. You say, okay, let's take a day or 2 days and let's regroup. Let's refocus on what the end goal is. And I just think that overall, my mom is 73 and uh, God willing, she has a lot of years left to live, and we want those to be her best years. So we just continue to um, stay focused on keeping her stable and going back to the recommendations, making sure that we're following the plans and double checking against one another to making sure that we're aligned. But it's something that you have to continuously make a decision to do day after day, week after week, and just to stay vigilant. And I think that's where the support that comes in is key.
Yeah.
And I would say, I think that this is, at least for me, this is Natalie, but there's almost been like phases to this thing. It's like the grief, maybe in the beginning, you're in that kind of grieving phase, and it's, everything feels unknown, and, you're kind of just throwing your faith into the program and to you, Dr. Bergman, but you're still just so unsure. And then I think the next stage was being overwhelmed in the beginning of like, this is a lot, but I think I almost wish I could have told myself back then, like, the hardest part, in my opinion, from a support place was getting organized and setting up a system that then, I could have told myself, man, in 6 months, this is just going to be routine and it's just a matter of our daily life. But in the beginning, you're really trying to figure it all out. Where do I get the medicine? Maybe I should send it to all to one pharmacy. What kind of things can I order off of Amazon to simplify? Can I do Instacart instead of going to the grocery store every single day? It gets better, in my opinion, because I think about my level of even comfort knowing that my mom is here. I went to California a few weeks ago for work. I didn't have concerns that she's here by herself. It's just, and I knew she was going to do all those things on the list because it has become very much a routine. But I think that from my perspective, the hardest part is consistency. And like Stacy said, it's never really like over, meaning in terms of hitting those same, trying to kind of push, but also knowing that my mom is the one that is having to really do these things. And so it's easy for me to say, oh, you only worked out 4 days this week, and then in my head, I'm like, I haven't worked out, but maybe one day, she's the one actually doing the work, so it's finding a balance between pushing because I understand what the importance of it is, but then also, making sure that we give grace as well.
And I would say the hardest part for me has been giving up control, releasing it to them and allowing them to. They're doing it's they are they're a blessing,
Yes.
and I know a lot of people do not have what I have, but it's very hard for me many times, to be honest, to let go and allow them to just take control, and they are take control kind of people.
Lisa, can I ask you a follow-up question to that in terms of what's difficulty? So, for all the things, whether it's the supplements or the exercise and the amount that we're asking to exercise, or the brain games, or the diet, what are the hard things for you, day to day? Or is there anything easy for you? That's the other question.
I think the hardest part for me, well, other than giving up the control, that's big for me, giving up
Sure.
the
Oh yeah.
control. As far as the medicines that I now take, the not well medicine, but the
Or
things,
supplements and the vitamins, all that
supplements,
stuff. Yeah.
that's not a problem for me. The supplements are not a problem for me. I have a problem with taking the having
The CPAP?
the CPAP,
Usually with the sleep machine.
the sleep machine, which that's about to change to a different phase. That's the only thing that I have that I really, really, really don't like.
Okay.
Had some conflict over the
A conflict
CPAP.
over that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's everybody's going to have something. Everybody has something
Yeah,
or
that
multiple
yeah.
things.
But I think that just getting on a schedule, just following through with my new life, you know, take this at this time, do this at this time, just revamping and starting a new life is basically it,
And,
and following through with it.
and how do you feel? Just to follow up on that one more time, Lisa. How do you feel about like? Okay, well, this may be until there's some
Yeah.
magic medication that just sort of erases Alzheimer's. I do believe that day to some degree will probably come, like where medications are pretty effective early on. if you get it early enough in the disease state. Um, how do you feel about like just okay, well, this will be my routine. I'm going to keep my brain active. I got to keep my body active. I got to eat right, and make sure I oxygenate when I sleep. And how do you feel about having to do that sort of indefinitely? Right.
Well, I think that I have gotten better. I've got a ways to go. Where, being honest, that I can say, it's 100% all in, but I'm doing what what needs to be done. I think that I've gotten a lot better as I've gotten more used to everything. As I develop, I'm a routine kind of person. So
Yeah.
as I've got into a routine, I really feel that I have gotten a lot more at ease with it, and more comfortable with the whole notion of everything.
Gotcha.
Um, so that's been helping me.
Okay. So over time, that's a big point. So over time, things
Over
can start
time,
to normalize routine, especially
yes.
if you are a routine person. Then they can sort of,
Well,
I don't know.
that's it exactly. I am a routine person, so as I have as I'm going through my routines, it's helping. It's helping me a lot.
We're all pretty routine and pretty structured. So I think that what we had to do is adjust to the new normal.
That's
And so just going through the process and ironing through the process, um, of course you hit your rough spots, but then you start to hit the routine of this is the new normal, and it flows. It starts to
Yeah,
flow and becomes
yeah,
easier.
yeah. Okay, this is excellent to know. My final sort of kind of question here, probably most likely, is how now, and I'll start with you, Lisa. How are you now thinking about success in terms of your own health, your own relationship with, call it Alzheimer's disease? Like, how do you think about what's a success, right? So we're not curing this per se, but you've had significant improvements, right? You're living with this. You're no longer declining. You've stabilized. You've had some improvements. We sort of anticipate the possibility of some more improvements as we continue to kind of tweak and move through this. You've been doing this for the better part of 6 months. How do you feel? Like, how are you thinking about what does success to you look like, Lisa?
Well, I it feels very encouraging, very encouraging. I feel it's kind of like a kid that has learned to ride a bike, and how they feel when they get on that bike for the first time by themselves. And so that's the way I feel. I feel that I'm doing more for myself as far as planning. I'm not as depend well now with Natalie and Stacy. I'm always going to be dependent on them because they're not going to let me off the hook. But I can fight it a little bit more now because I think they see that I am um, doing more on for myself. So I think they've eased off somewhat. They come back when necessary, but they have eased off more. So I would say that as I've gotten more comfortable with everything, it's helping me to feel better, feeling more independent, um, more capable of doing things on my own, much more confident. So it has really, really, and the whole routine of it. I know exactly what I need to do. When I wake up, and what I need to do during the day, and I'm able to have a life. I'm able to
Yes,
return to a life, which is great.
absolutely. How about you guys? That's so. I love hearing that. This is what I, other than my family, this is what I live for, to hear stuff like that. And I just I do want to ask you guys, Natalie and Stacy, how do you think about success, knowing that we're not talking about curing, we're talking about treating, we're talking about improvements, and they are.
Mhm.
Um, I still get chills when I think of about people that are improving when they're putting in the work. It's very exciting. How do you guys think about it?
Yeah, I think this is Natalie. So for me, there's a couple key things that I'm always kind of thinking about in terms of success. with this program. One is, you said the word mom, independence. That was our main motivator. If I'm being honest, it wasn't improving her test score. In terms of the test that you gave. Um, it wasn't even change, like hoping there would be some change scientifically in the MRI. It wasn't that. It's more so what's important to my mom is her independence. That's how she's wired. It's who she is. And for her, I know how important that is for her. And that's important for me too. And so the idea of thinking, back when in November, when I thought about what this could look like if we did nothing, I just saw her becoming less independent and then, not being able to do the things that she enjoys in life. And one of the things, Dr. Bergman, that you always ask us when we come into the office is, you'll say, I'm less concerned about the scores or, the cognition scores on this test and more concerned about your quality of life.
Yeah.
So to me, that is probably the success. And then from my standpoint as her daughter, I want her to be present as she is. I want that to last as long as possible. So when I see her reading books to like my little cousins that are like toddlers age, those are the moments where I'm like, I feel so comforted and so encouraged because that's what I want her to do with my kids when I have them. So it's that kind
Yeah.
of quality of life to me that is the success of the program. It's not if you're calling the color purple or red. It's much bigger than that.
Yeah.
It is about maintaining who she is as a person and having that pass on as much as possible to our family and new little ones in the family one day. So
Yeah.
Right. Well, this is Stacy. I think Natalie pretty much covered everything, but just to reiterate, I think that it was, putting the tools in place to keep my mom's life as close as possible to where it had previously been. And then also, I wanted to be able to fully experience life with my mom the way that I normally see her. She is very, very funny. Um, she keeps
it's
me
huge.
laughing even throughout the process. She's kept me laughing. Calling us. I think I'm the night guard, and she calls my sister the
Morning
morning
guard.
guard, and saying that because we enforce the rules. And the other night she was in her room, and she called out. She's like, guard. Um,
There's a guard banging on the yeah, right.
yeah, and she'll tell us what she needs, or
It's
so
good that you
she
have a sense of humor because it is intense and it is, does require discipline. There's no question about it. And some people are sort of naturals at this, but the vast majority, I would say, from our experience so far, are not. This is stuff that doesn't just sort
yeah,
of come naturally. Otherwise, everybody would be doing it, right?
yeah, and that has come with time as we've gotten more used to the new norm, and we've all been able to relax a little bit and have a little bit of levity about it. Every single one of us are going to have challenges in life. And this is a challenge that has come to our family. So we're just trying to face it head on, um, make the best of it, and do what is necessary in order to keep my mom here and fully cognizant and the
And
person that she is.
if I could say one more thing, I'm just again, I just want to say I'm just so grateful and thankful that they were able to find you, you guys, and what you do, because I think it really, um, it's just encouraging. It's gives me, it's just something that is good for me. It's good
You
for me
hope.
personally. Uh, and I know friends or I know people who have um, gone through things and decline, and that's the end of them. I just want to be as much of me who I am as long as I can be, and I think
Absolutely.
that this has given me that ability.
Oh, thank you. So thank you so much for taking your time to be with us. I know you guys have busy lives and a lot of responsibilities other than to each other. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and I know already that a lot of people will be able to connect with what you're going through, be able to listen to what you guys have done, and kind of the reality of it all, and that it's possible to succeed despite the challenges. So again, thank you so much for the time, and I'll see you guys and talk to you guys soon.
Thank you, Dr. Bergman.
Thank you.
So that's our episode. I hope it was useful to you. Check out the show notes on iTunes or on our website where we've summarized key points. If you find the information here valuable, please consider giving us a 5-star rating on iTunes and leaving comments in the comments section. It will really help us bring this message to as many people as we can. If you have questions or comments, connect with us on social media. Finally, to support us, go to patreon.com/evolvingpast and consider hitting the button and becoming a patron of this show. That's Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/evolvingpast. Thanks. I'll talk to you next time.